So, listen to this. Every hardcore football fan has become obsessed with the way Brighton signs new players because, one way or another, they seem to pull these world-class talents out of thin air like they have a crystal ball or something. They have the most overpowered scouting team in the Premier League, and they barely ever make any mistakes. Which is exactly what makes these stories so much more interesting, because the one mistake they made, the one good player they let go of, might have been the very best to ever step foot at their club. If you haven't heard about him yet, this is Victor Gyökeres, and he's an absolute freak of a footballer. In the last 15 years, the Portuguese league has brought you Di Maria, Nani, Coentrão, James, Falcão, Hulk, Bernardo, Black, Ederson, Felix, Bruno, Militão, Núñez. It's a seemingly infinite pool of ridiculous talent, and still, I can't stop myself from seeing Gyokeres as maybe the most exciting of all. 50 matches, 43 goals and 14 assists, the most goal contributions in the entire world. This guy arrived in Portugal and took 5 Player of the Month awards in a row. In Sweden, they already talk about him as the new Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Portuguese newspapers can't stop mentioning how much he reminds them of Ronaldo, and personally, he reminds me a lot of pre-injury Lukas Podolski, which is a scary thought, especially considering that Gyokeres never seems to get injured. Honestly, he might just be the scariest player I've ever seen in this league. Not only is he physically imposing, capable of taking on any center-back, but no matter his size, he's still freakishly fast and capable with his feet. The outcome is a player who can create more chances than the league's best playmakers, who can score more goals than the best target man, and take on 1v1, often even 1v2 situations, as well as the best wingers available. As one newspaper put it, is a transition demon, a Frankenstein footballer, an Ivan Drago lookalike who seems like he came straight out of a lab. And still, we gotta ask the question, how exactly did this guy get 26 years of age, playing right under the noses of all the Premier League greats, and still leave without anyone noticing? Even now, how is no one triggered his release clause? Look, to show you just how much Brighton messed up, we gotta go back to the 17th of September 2020. Brighton were playing 3rd Division Portsmouth for the second round of the Carabao Cup. For all intents and purposes, this was kind of a meaningless match, but in a way, that's what made it so special in retrospect, because with the stakes being so low, Graham Potter fielded a lot of players who otherwise would not get much of a chance to play, and among those names, 2 stood out: Victor Gyökeres and Alexis McAllister. At the time, they were both 23 years old, had both played less than 10 matches for the club, and that day, they each scored their first goal for Brighton. In fact, Gyokeres even got an assist as well. But while McAllister's goal allowed them to get called back for the next League Cup match and then to slowly get introduced into the starting 11, taking over the team and being sold to Liverpool for a fortune just 3 years later, Gyokeres experienced the exact opposite. 2 weeks later, he had already been loaned out, and without ever stepping foot in a Premier League match, he would never again play for Brighton. But why were the two players treated so differently? Well, if you really look at each of their famous signings, they didn't really appear out of thin air. McAllister was already doing well at Boca Juniors, Buonanotte came from Rosario Central, Trossard was amazing at Genk, Mitoma was even en route to play Champions League football with St. Gilloise. In fact, a lot of their best players like Gilmore, Lamptey and Welbeck came straight from top clubs like Arsenal, United and Chelsea, but Gyokeres, well, as one of his coaches at Brighton would admit, we found it hard to believe the club had dug up such a talent straight from the Swedish second tier without facing any competition. And to a certain extent, you really can't blame them. Gyokeres really had come out of nowhere. Back before they found him, his only ever transfer, if you can even call it that, came when he was scouted at 15 years of age by IF Bromma Poikarna. If you never heard of them, well, that isn't exactly surprising. They were one of the worst teams in the Swedish league. In fact, even though it took less than 2 years for Gyokeres to get promoted to their first team, by then, they had already gotten relegated after one of the worst league campaigns you'll ever see. Just 12 points from 30 matches, even the second worst team had more than twice their points. You could argue that, at the time, they weren't even good enough for the second tier, and you know what? You'd be right. The next year, even with Gyokeres getting his first few minutes for the team, they finished last place once more, winning only 5 matches all year. Suddenly, Gyokeres was approaching his 19th birthday, and when he should have been following the footsteps of Zlatan, maybe getting a move to Malmö or, one of the top clubs in Sweden, instead, he was in the 3rd tier of a league where it's already hard to get some time in the spotlight. Regardless, as you can imagine, that did not stop him. In fact, it just dragged him all the way back to the top. Right then and there, even if he was only just being introduced into the team, he still managed to finish his first full season with a stretch of 7 goals in 11 matches that not only helped get the club back up to the second tier, but already made him their second highest goal scorer and most likely earned him a call-up to the Swedish under-19s, where once again, he immediately left his mark, scoring against Italy to qualify them to the under-19 Euros for the first time in their history. And after all of that, obviously Broma Poikarna realized that it would be their ticket back to the top tier, and before you knew it, he had become the star of the team, starting off the league season with 13 goal contributions in 14 league matches, then going away for the Euros and doing an absolute madness. Look, Sweden went out in the group stage without a single win, and still, in a tournament where players like Rafael Leão, Mason Mount and Jota all played more matches than Gyökeres, he still came out as the top scorer, getting a goal in every game he played. And of course, once back in his country, he completed his mission, not only leading his team to yet another title, scoring a hat-trick in the final match day, but also making sure to score the goal that would put them in the semi-finals of the Swedish Cup against all odds. And if for a second you doubted that Gyokeres really had been responsible for the team's rebirth, then let me tell you that it was right after this that he left, and almost immediately Broma Poikarna ended up getting relegated twice in a row again. They were nothing without him. Regardless, he was finally at Brighton, and the first sort of problem to come up was that Gyokeres was sent straight to the under-23s, and though this is not inherently wrong, I mean, eventually did the same to Fofana and that worked out, well, back then, it wasn't the same. Brighton's under-23s weren't even in the first division, and though Gyokeres performed every time, scoring 11 goals in his first 12 appearances for them, leading them to promotion and then keeping it all up in the first division, after one full year at the club's academy, even if he was already playing his first few games with the Swedish national team, Brighton were still yet to figure out what was his best position, constantly going back and forth between playing him on the wing or as a striker, and even worse, it still didn't seem like there would be a place for him in the first team anytime soon, allowing him only 91 minutes of playing time across that whole year. And then, to add fuel to the fire, Graham Potter replaced Chris Hughton as the club's manager, and with the team switching to a new game style that in the opinion of the staff just didn't fit Gyokeres, the under-23's head coach recommended that they loan him out, and soon, he was going straight to St. Pauli in the German second tier. But again, this was especially frustrating because even if he performed quite well there with 11 goal contributions in around 1600 minutes of game time, once he made it back, you again got the feeling they didn't even consider keeping him in the first team, as it was right then that the whole situation with McAllister went down. While every other player that showed some promise was given a shot, Gyökeres was sent on yet another loan, this time to Swansea, where he hit the lowest point of his career. First, testing positive for COVID, then seriously struggling with long-term symptoms, never really getting back to full fitness, and watching as his move got cancelled less than 4 months after arriving at the club, unjustly killing any remaining belief Brighton had in his progression. Thankfully, the thing about hitting rock bottom is that you can only go up from there, and that's exactly where Coventry City came into the picture. You see, they had just gotten promoted to the championship, so they felt they had nothing to lose in giving Gyökeres the chance he was so desperate for, and with his performances over the rest of the season not exactly blowing anyone's mind, once they offered Brighton €1 million for his permanent signing, they took it. After 2.5 years of waiting for his talent to develop, even they began doubting their own scouting department. Little did they know that their problem was exactly that they had been waiting rather than acting. Meanwhile, at Coventry, this bat wasn't as innocent as it may have seemed from the outside. Over those 5 months, Gyökeres had built a close relationship with manager Mark Robbins, who had played as a striker at the likes of Man United and Man City. And you know what they say, it takes one to know one. Robbins was maybe the first to realize that Gyökeres had everything to become a predator, and as the man himself would tell the press, it's good to finally have someone who understands me. And rightfully, from there on out, he blossomed. 11 goal contributions in the first 11 matches of the season, and the moment Zlatan injured his knee and had to miss the World Cup qualifiers, there was no doubt Gyökeres would be the one tasked with filling his shoes. But still, by the end of the season, even with 21 goal contributions in the championship and some of the most incredibly clutch performances in the country, he was being labeled a one-season wonder. At times, it almost felt like it was Gyokeres against the world. The guy could never catch a break. But that only made him more relentless, and the next season, he made sure no one would ever say those words again. With the new season starting, Gyökeres seemed to improve every single month. In September, he was involved in 1 goal. In October, he made that 3. By November, he brought it up to 4. In December, he doubled down. And from February onwards, with Coventry sitting at 11th place and needing a miracle if they wanted to make it to the promotion playoffs, Gyökeres hit cruise speed. 15 goal contributions in 15 matches across 2.5 months. Coventry had only lost 1 single game since February, and to the shock of everyone, they had secured the 5th place finish, their highest placement since their relegation from the Premier League 22 years before. And once Gyökeres assisted their only goal in the playoff semi-finals, the only thing between them and a comeback to the top of English football was Luton Town. And after Coventry went behind early into the match, guess who assisted the decisive goal? Victor Gyökeres. Still, after 120 minutes on the battlefield, it all came down to penalties, and though Gyökeres scored his, Coventry lost in sudden death, and Shubhak Pom beat him to the Player of the Season award. But as one newspaper had said before the match, wherever the result, there's one man you feel cannot lose, and that's Victor Gyökeres, because in everyone's eyes, he was already the winner. His 12 assists put him on top of the charts, his 21 goals made him the championship's second highest goal scorer, and in seemingly every advanced stat, from progressive carries to shot-creating actions and successful take-ons, he came out on top every single time. And so, with a handful of Premier League clubs coming for his signing, Gyökeres with only 1 year left in his contract and Coventry stuck in the championship, a transfer seemed unavoidable. But as he made up his mind between Everton, Wolves, Crystal Palace and Fulham, Sporting CP showed up, offering a club record 20 million euros for his signing, as well as 4 million in bonuses and a 15% profit share whenever they ended up selling him. In other words, Sporting saw a true phenomenon and threw at them everything they had in exchange for the opportunity to have him in Lisbon, because if there was one thing they needed desperately, it was goals. They had only been able to outscore either of their rivals, Porto and Benfica, once in the previous 15 years. But then Gyökeres arrived. On his league debut, he scored twice. On his first Europa League match, he scored again. On his League Cup debut, he scored the hat-trick, and once he played in the Portuguese Cup, he scored and assisted. As one newspaper wrote, the most shocking thing about Gyökeres is his endless hunger, destroying every opponent who comes in his way and treating everyone equally. May it be an European game or a cup game, Gyökeres will not stop. And they meant that. By February, not only had he taken the League's Player of the Month award 5 times in a row, quite literally winning every single one since his arrival, but he had already hit 25 goals for Sporting, blowing past one of the clauses in his contract and forcing the club to pay an extra €1 million to Coventry. And let me tell you, if even for a second you thought of pinning this on a Portuguese league's supposed lack of quality, I guess I should warn you that at that point, his best performance of the season had not come against some random no-name team. No, it came against Porto, where the one-man marking Gyökeres was no other than Pep. You know, the 3-time Champions League winner. And as much as it hurts me to say, Gyökeres did not struggle. He scored 10 minutes into the game after making Pep look like a rag doll, then scored again 30 minutes later, only getting the goal disallowed by VAR due to something that was completely out of his control, and finally going on a 60-yard run all the way up the pitch, getting one-on-one with the keeper, playing it out to a teammate, killing the match, and completely justifying however much more money that they've spent on him, with their manager Ruben Amorim even telling the press that Gyökeres did not become 1 million more expensive, he became 1 million cheaper, because after all, even with one-off performances to the side, well, remember their whole problem with goal scoring. At that point, Sporting wasn't just outscoring one, but both of their rivals, though Gyokeres wasn't even close to done. Right from that moment on, he went on a run of 10 goals and 3 assists in 12 matches, only once playing a full 90 without getting his name on the score sheet, and even then, when just a few weeks later he was put in doubt for their second league match against Porto. Not only did he end up making it to the bench, but with Sporting 2 goals behind, they brought him in regardless, and I kid you not, he scored to bring one back in the 87th minute, and less than a minute after that, he had already scored the equalizer. Not to mention that the following match he scored another, and suddenly Sporting were champions. And it wasn't even that it was only their second league title in over 20 years, or that they were leading by 10 points, their best finish since 1950. No, what shocked me the most was that they were on 96 goals, 19 more than Benfica, 33 more than Porto, and 23 more than their best tally of the 21st century. Long gone were the claims that Sporting couldn't get numbers on the score sheet, and it was very clearly thanks to the fact that Gyokeres had completely demolished the goal-scoring charts. You could take all 3 of Porto's top scorers, Evanilson, Galeno and Taremi, and still altogether they had 28 goals. You could do the same for Benfica, get Rafa Silva, Di Maria and Kokshu, and they totaled 30 goals. Meanwhile, Gyokeres, all by himself, was on 29. It wasn't even up for discussion who the player of the year was, and still, after a summer where shockingly no one had the decency to pay up and get this monster away from my country, now he's already on 19 goal contributions, and it's only been a month and a half since the season started, meaning that if impossibly he somehow keeps going at this rate, he'll finish the year with 103 goal contributions, matching Messi's best ever season. And if that isn't enough to make you scared of this villain, guess why he always does that one celebration? Because as he explained it himself, no one cared who I was until I put on the mask.